There's a moment in season 1 where Niles Crane orders a coffee, and the order takes 11 words: non-fat, half-calf, dry cappuccino, extra dry, cinnamon on the side. And everyone laughs because that's the joke. Niles is fussy, Niles is precious. Niles is the punchline about a man who irons his shoelaces. But a few days ago, I was rewatching that scene, and something landed on me that I can't shake. Niles doesn't order like that because he's picky. He orders like that because it's the only place in his entire life where he gets to say exactly what he wants and have someone hand it to him. Niles Crane spent 11 years wanting one thing and never asking for it. And the show trained us to find that funny. But here's the thing most people miss. I've watched Frasier more times than I'd ever admit out loud, and Cheers before it, and I've spent a genuinely embarrassing amount of time thinking about this family. And I've been sitting on this one for a while, because when you actually track what happens to Niles across the run of this show, you don't see a fussy little brother with a crush. You see a man who only knows how to love things that are out of reach, and who arranged his entire life to make sure they stayed that way. So grab a sherry, pull up a chair in the good room, because I want to walk you through this. Let me start with the pattern nobody talks about, because it's not in any one episode. It's in all of them. Niles is a psychiatrist. His job, his actual credentialed daily job, is to sit in a room and help people say the thing they can't say. That's it. That's the entire profession. He is professionally trained in the exact skill he cannot perform for himself. And the show puts that irony right in front of you for 11 years and never once slows down to let you feel it. Think about who Niles has. Frasier? Frasier is a competitor before he's a brother. Every conversation between them is a scoreboard. Martin? Martin loves Niles, genuinely. But Martin doesn't speak the language and never tries to learn it. He calls the wine grape juice and moves on. Maris? Maris isn't a person. She's a locked door with a voice behind it. Daphne? Daphne is the one he wants, which means she's the one person he can't be honest with, by definition. Roz thinks he's a snob. The KACL crowd barely registers him. Niles Crane is a man standing outside a window looking in at a room that has his name on the reservation. He's been given the address. He's dressed for it. He will never walk through the door because walking through the door would mean the wanting stops, and the wanting is the only thing he actually knows how to do. Now watch him actually do it. Start with Maris. We never see her, not once, in 11 years. And that's played as a running gag, the invisible wife, the woman so thin she has to move around in a stiff wind. But look at what he actually tells us about her. She's cold, she's withholding, she locks him out, she humiliates him at parties. He describes a marriage where affection is rationed and he is perpetually auditioning for it. And when she finally leaves, when the door he's been knocking on for years actually swings open and she's gone, what does he do? He falls apart. He begs. He goes to therapy about it. This man was miserable for a decade, and the second the misery ended, he tried to get it back. Because the misery was familiar. The misery had a shape. Then Daphne. 7 years. 7 years of a man in the same apartment as the woman he loves, and he says nothing. And we all read that as romance, right? The show scores it that way. The longing looks, the near misses, the mistaken confessions. But run it back. Every single time Niles gets close to actually telling her, something intervenes. And here's the part that got me. Half the time, the thing intervening is Niles. He invents the obstacle. He finds the reason. He is a psychiatrist who cannot identify the pattern he is living inside of, and the pattern is that he only wants what he's not allowed to have. Watch what happens when he does get her. Season 8, they finally end up together, and the show, to its credit, does not give him peace. It gives him a wedding that keeps not happening. It gives him a fertility crisis. It gives him a wife who's a person now, with opinions, with a mother. with a body that doesn't cooperate. The fantasy came into the room and turned into a marriage, and Niles has never once known what to do with a thing that's actually his. And then there's the one that broke me, Season 5. The episode where Niles finally gets a place of his own after Maris throws him out, and Frasier comes over, and Niles has this apartment, and it's small, and it's wrong, and there's a moment where he's talking about the bench in the lobby of the Montana. He talks about sitting there. He talks about how he'd like it if someone sat with him. And Frasier, his brother, the other psychiatrist in the room, doesn't hear it. He rolls right past it into whatever Frasier is doing that week. I sat there staring at the wall, because that's the whole thing. That's the entire character in one beat. Niles reached. He actually reached, not with a fantasy, not with a longing look at Daphne, but with a plain, unarmored, embarrassingly human sentence about wanting company. And the person he reached toward was so busy performing that he didn't register it. And Niles never reached that way again. He went back to the coffee order. He went back to the sherry. He went back to wanting the thing across the room, because wanting across a room is safe, and asking a person to your face is not. There's a term for this in attachment psychology. Anxious avoidant. It sounds contradictory, and that's exactly why it fits. People with this pattern are desperate for closeness and terrified of it at the same time, so they solve the problem by choosing partners who are unavailable. It's not bad luck. It's a strategy. If the person can never actually be reached, you get to feel the wanting forever without ever risking the part where they see you and leave. The intimacy stays theoretical. The rejection never becomes real because it never becomes anything. Maris is unavailable by temperament. Daphne is unavailable by circumstance. Mel is unavailable by cruelty. Every woman Niles Crane chooses is a woman he cannot fully have, and he chooses them himself over and over, and he is a psychiatrist, and he never sees it. But here's what actually finished me off. It's not any of that. It's the things that never happen. Nobody ever asks Niles how he's doing. Not once. Not seriously. Frasier asks him things constantly. Frasier asks him for opinions, for opera partners, for backup in an argument, for a ride, but nobody in 11 years sits Niles down and says, "Hey, are you okay?" Nobody notices that a man was married to someone who locked him out of his own house, and that he was in that house for a decade. Nobody says, "Niles, you've been in love with the physical therapist for 7 years, and it's eating you alive. Do you want to talk about it?" Martin never says it. Frasier never says it. Daphne, who is the most emotionally perceptive person in that apartment, who reads Martin like a book, never once says it, and the show has to keep her from noticing, or the plot collapses. Nobody ever tells Niles he's good at his job. Nobody ever tells him he's a good brother. Nobody says thank you when he shows up, and he always shows up. He is at every crisis, every dinner, every scheme, every one of Frasier's disasters, and not one person in that show ever looks at him and says, "I'm glad you're here." And here's the cross-show piece that makes it worse. Go back to Cheers. Frasier Crane spends years in that bar telling stories about his family, and Niles is not in them. Not mentioned, not once. Frasier Crane, who will talk about anything, who tells that bar about his mother, his childhood, his marriage, his patience. He has a brother, and the brother doesn't come up. And you can call that a writer's error, and technically it is. But watch what the show does with it. It never fixes it. It never explains it. It just lets it sit there, and I've come to think it's the truest thing in the franchise. Frasier didn't mention Niles because Frasier didn't think about Niles. He spent years in a bar in Boston building a version of his life for an audience of strangers, and his own brother wasn't load-bearing enough to make the story. Niles was erased from his brother's autobiography, and he never even knew it happened. Now, some people are going to push back here, and I want to be fair about it. They'll say Niles gets the happy ending. He gets Daphne. He gets the marriage, the house, the baby on the way. He's the one Crane who actually lands it. Frasier ends up on a plane alone, and Niles ends up with everything he wanted. So where's the tragedy? And someone on the Frasier subreddit put this better than I can. There are thousands of comments about this, and the one that stuck with me was something like, he didn't get what he wanted, he got what he was chasing, and those aren't the same thing, because watch him after. Watch him in season 10, 11. He's married to Daphne and he's still anxious. He's still performing. He's still standing slightly outside his own life, narrating it. The chase ended and the man underneath it was still the man underneath it, because nobody ever addressed the actual wound. They just handed him the prize. Which brings me to the last thing, and this is the part I think the writers did on purpose. And it's cruel. The show ends with Frasier on a plane. Big moment, big speech, the whole series lands on his face. And Niles is where he's always been, in the room he was in, being happy quietly, off to the side. He got his life. It just wasn't the story. 11 years, and the show that gave him everything still couldn't quite make him the point. He's the guy in the background of his own happy ending. And the last thing Frasier says to him, in that whole finale, is not, "I'm sorry I never asked." It's not, "I saw you." It's a joke. It's a bit. Because that's the only language those two ever built between them, and neither of them ever tried to build another one, and now the plane's boarding. Niles Crane spent his whole life standing outside a window, looking into a room with his name on the reservation. And in the end, somebody finally opened the door and let him in, and he sat down at the table, and he was happy. And not one person in that room ever turned to him and asked how long he'd been standing out in the cold. That's not a sitcom character. That's a man nobody ever asked. And if you can't stop thinking about him now either, good. Pull up a chair. There's room.